Alright, so generally on this channel, I like to focus on black metal, death metal, heavy metal, and thrash metal. But today, I want to do bands that don't really fit that mold at all. And even though these bands don't exactly fit the mold of what I usually listen to, some of these are, some of my all-time favorite bands. And I just wanted to pick a few of them that, in my opinion, kind of stand alone genre-wise. As we get further along in the video, I think you'll kind of get what I mean. But anyway, let's just get into it, starting with GOJIRA. So obviously, a lot of you probably know this band from the French surfing town of André, and they describe themselves as being kind of like French rednecks. But GOJIRA is one of the most surprising success stories in modern metal. They started off kind of as like a small, no-name, decent death metal-esque kind of band, and then they ended up growing so much in popularity that they ended up, playing for the opening ceremony in the Olympics. And the way I see it, GOJIRA kind of has like three eras of the band. You have the first couple albums still figuring out the growing pains of songwriting. Then you have what I'd call kind of the classic era, which would be from Mars to Sirius going up to L'Enfant Sauvage. And then, of course, starting with, I believe, 2016's Magma, they've kind of got a more, it's still metal, but it's a bit of a more mainstream, more accessible kind of sound. So starting with the early era of the band, 2001's Terra Incognita and 2003's The Link, I call this the songwriting growing pains era because while they were able to really make some kick-ass songs like Remembrance, The Link, Lizard Skin, Clone, a lot of these songs have what Glenn Fricker of Spectre Sound Studios would call riff salad disease, where instead of writing these songs that kind of have a sense of movement and progression, you kind of just get, all right, here's a riff, here's another riff, another riff, another riff, and then the song ends. And then as a listener, you're kind of listening like, yeah, that was one of the songs of all time, for sure. But it is a common saying in the NFL that you need to give a young quarterback 3 years to develop before you can really judge them as an NFL player. And I think the same was for GOJIRA. The first two albums that they had definitely showed some promise, but they didn't have everything all figured out. But then on their third album, they figured it out. So GOJIRA's third album, From Mars to Sirius, in my opinion, their masterpiece. I actually came across this album just by pure chance. My local record store, they have a deal where if you get 5 used CDs, you get 2 of them for free. And so I had 4, didn't really know what to pick for my 5th, saw this, I was like, oh, I've heard of GOJIRA, so I threw it in. And to be honest, I wasn't immediately blown away with this album. I was listening to it, I was like, yeah, it's kind of interesting, but I don't know, I didn't really get it at first. I was like, this is kind of like death metal, but it also isn't really like death metal. But then eventually, as I kept listening and sticking around, these songs just drew their claws deeper into my psyche. All right? Pick Scrapes, Change a Man. But this album has backbone, heaviest matter of the universe, flying whales, in the wilderness. I mean, this was all I listened to for like 2 months.
Cold, and the world is silent. Space flight at speed of the night that grows. The clouds and color.
And the follow-up to that album, The Way of All Flesh in 2008, is just a second helping of the technical riffing goodness. You got the song Staten Island, Toxic Garbage Island, which sounds like a steampunk contraption with all the wacky noises going on with it. I remember I was talking to this girl that liked GOJIRA, so I was like, I'm going to learn how to play that on drums. That'll be sure to impress her. But that song was really, really hard. I had to learn it like 2 seconds at a time. There's so many like weird accents and syncopations and whatnot. And ultimately, when it was time for us to go on a date, she ended up, I got stood up, which hurt my feelings. But I'm not mad, okay? Don't laugh! Don't laugh! Although my favorite song on the album, I would say, is probably Esoteric Surgery. Has that super cool, tremolo pick guitar riff intro, and then has that awesome, like, MESHUGGAH-esque polyrhythm riff. L'Enfant Sauvage is also cool, but this GOJIRA segment is getting too long, so I'm just going to skip that one for now. And let's start talking about the final era of the band, starting with Magma. Now, this is like GOJIRA's version of Metallica's Black Album, in the sense that the kind of more mainstream, more accessible sound definitely pissed off some of the older fans, but it also significantly increased Gojira's audience and reach. Detractors will say that the band sold out. The band themselves have said something to the effect of, sometimes when you write these really technical songs and you have to play them on stage every night, like that can kind of be a pain in the ass. Also, the way they write songs is different now. I guess, I'm not 100% sure how they did it before, but the way they do it now is they basically just kind of have a jam session, and, you know, they basically just dick around on the instruments until they find something they like. So I think that kind of explains why the sound is kind of a lot more simpler, a lot more groovier. And if I'm being honest, you know, speaking for myself, I definitely prefer the heavier stuff, like The Way of All Flesh, From Mars to Sirius. But this newer stuff is still good, too. It's still got some good songs, like you got The Sphinx, Silvera, and my favorite song of the new Gojira age, Stranded.
Don't lock the door on me. You kill me face down dead.
Number 2, MESHUGGAH from Sweden. Now I know some of you might be saying, Radon666, you said in the intro you kind of wanted bands that stand alone, that don't really fit into a specific genre. Aren't MESHUGGAH patient zero for gent? And yes, you are correct. But I would also say, it's not MESHUGGAH's fault that everyone else decided to see what they were doing and just rip them off. You know, MESHUGGAH was just trying to do their own thing and everyone else decided to copy it. But kind of like GOJIRA, MESHUGGAH needed a little bit of time to figure it out, although they didn't need as much. Their debut album, Contradictions Collapse, definitely not a bad album, but it doesn't really sound 100% like MESHUGGAH. It kind of sounds more like thrash metal, and Jens Kidman, the vocalist, he sounds more like James Hetfield than what he would go on to sound like later. Although MESHUGGAH would figure it out pretty quickly. Right after recording that album, they made this EP, simply entitled None, which really features the kind of classic MESHUGGAH genty sound that we're all familiar with.
No one knows the soul of tears and wine that we see human indignity.
MESHUGGAH would stay with that sound, they would develop that sound. On their next album, Destroy, Erase, Improve, MESHUGGAH as we know them was born. Hang on, Destroy, Erase, Improve? DEI? In this presidential administration? Alright, I guess I can't listen to that anymore. I imagine some of you are already familiar with MESHUGGAH's sound, but if you are not familiar with MESHUGGAH's sound, basically they are a very rhythmically oriented band, as I like to say. Alright, there's not a lot of melody to go around here. So their music focuses on odd syncopation. So if you don't know what syncopation means, it's basically how do you emphasize a rhythm. So for example, like if you just take a straight quarter note pulse, very simple, very straight, you would not say that is syncopated. But if you take something like a 4/3 polyrhythm, you know, there's more going on there, you'd say that's kind of more syncopated. And they achieve this odd syncopation by having like the guitars play a riff that's maybe 7 beats long, keep the drums in 4, and then that kind of creates an odd pattern that repeats itself every so often. And in addition to that, they also do stuff like with a lot of polyrhythms. And I'm a big fan of polyrhythms. You got songs like Do Not Look Down, New Millennium, Cyanide Christ, and Future Breed Machine, for a few examples.
We mold in minds, control our thoughts, no more doubts. The new way is here.
But I think my favorite MESHUGGAH songs are when they just really lean into the mind-melting riffs. One example I would say is the opener for their album called Nothing. You got one called None, got one called Nothing. The song called Stenga, which sounds really, really simple. And I remember thinking like, oh, I could definitely play this on the drums, but I don't know what kind of black magic hex they put on this song, but like just try to play to it on drums. It sounds really easy, but it's fucking hard. And for me, the prime example for crazy-ass MESHUGGAH rhythms, aside from the song Bleed, everyone knows Bleed, that's like their biggest song. Also from the Nothing album is the third song, Perpetual Black Second.
This fearless flame carrying all my zombie enemies, dilated into the slow wave, going
I would say that the classic era of Meshuggah runs from 1992's None EP all the way up into 2008's Obzen, which was the band's breakout record. It has their biggest hit, Bleed. But starting with 2012's Coloss, and this is Coloss, I lost the album artwork a long time ago. I don't know what happened to it. But starting with Coloss, kind of similar to GOJIRA, the emphasis was less on speed and intensity and just really, really focusing on the kind of groovy, syncopated rhythms. And one final note I want to make on Modern Meshuggah, you people need to put some fucking respect on the Violent Sleeper Reason. Now, I know you people can't think for yourselves. You saw that Fantano said this album is not good. Well, you know what? Fantano's not just a clown. He's the whole goddamn circus. Thomas Haka's drumming on this album is amazing. And I'm sure he was doing it before on other albums, but I think it really shows itself here is just how he masters using stuff like ghost notes and kind of like little accents on the drums just to really keep his playing dynamic. And honestly, I think this album is really a grower. I think it's something that kind of takes a few listens to understand, because when I first heard it, I didn't really like it all that much either, but you know, I kind of stuck around with it. You know, songs like Clockwork started to make more sense to me. You got Nostrum, Monstra City, you know, get it? Number 3, also from Sweden, we got Ghost. And I don't give a shit what nobody says. Ghost is legit. Ghost is the shit. You can go F yourself if you don't like them. You want to know why I love Ghost so much? It is because they know how to write a friggin' song. Like, I know some people might think the costumes and characters are over the top and, you know, it's not the heaviest music ever made, but you cannot tell me these songs are not catchy. Their 2010 debut is full of classics, even if it's, you know, a little raw production-wise as far as Ghost standards go. But, you know, you got the classic Ritual, Elizabeth, Stand By Him. From the jump, songwriter Tobias Forge was showing that he had the chops to write kick-ass songs. And while I'm at it, I want to defend Ghost's second album, Infestussimam, or however the hell you say it. Because I think it's overhated. And my hypothesis for that is that I think as far as like the songs, and I guess maybe more so the atmosphere, I feel like it's kind of a dark Ghost album. It doesn't sound as bright or necessarily as poppy as, you know, some of the stuff on Opus Eponymous, the debut, and what would feature later on in Meliora, which was their breakout album. Come together. I really love the intro, Infestussimam, going right into Per Aspera ad Inferni. I think that's just absolutely perfect. And then, you know, you got the single Secular Haze, you got Monstrance Clock. You got some really kick-ass songs in here. Come on, people, what's wrong with you? Obviously, Meliora, the band's breakout album, is fantastic. I believe they won an American Grammy for the song Cerise. But for me, 2018's Prequel is on an equal, if not greater, level than Meliora. Literally every single song on this album is amazing, all right? Even the instrumental, Miasma Rules, even Pro Memoriam, which are the lyrics a little cringy? Absolutely, but I do not give a shit because Ghost is legit.
Don't you forget about dying. Don't you forget about your friend death. Don't you forget that you will die.
Impera ain't the best, but it still has some decent songs. Although I friggin' hate Kaiserion. I can't stand that song. But another thing about Ghost, too, throughout their discography, they've kind of dropped some EPs every so often. Obviously, this one, Pope Star, features one of their biggest songs, Square Hammer, and then a bunch of other covers, like Echo and the Bunnymen's Nocturnal Me, which that was a great cover. And then for the If You Have Ghost, I think they did this right before Infestussimam, had the single for Secular Haze, or at least a live version of it. And probably my favorite song on this album is their cover of Crucified.
I've seen the deepest darkness and wrestled with the gods. I ride a noble harness, raiding cats and dogs.
All right, final band on the list for today, Probably my favorite out of all these bands, one of my just favorite bands ever since I was an adolescent. Tool. I promise I will do my best not to sound like an annoying Tool fan, but I kind of like to joke that these guys did acid for me, because listening to their music basically kind of totally changed the trajectory of my life. Now, I know that is exactly the type of thing an annoying Tool fan would say, but I mean, I mean it. After listening to their music, you know, I started becoming much more interested in music itself. And, you know, I had been playing drums for a while, but I started taking the drums a lot more seriously, you know, like practicing to a metronome, working on rudiments, learning some theory, things like that. Because I was listening to these songs and I'm hearing what Danny Carey is playing, and I'm like, what is that? First three Tool songs that I ever heard was Schism, Vicarious, and Lateralis. I believe in that order. And I remember, especially when I was listening to the song Schism, and it kind of has that ambient guitar break, or maybe it's guitars and keyboard, just like wow, 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 you know, kind of like that. I just remember thinking to myself, like, how do you even come up with music like this? Listening to Tool, it was the first time that I had ever heard music that transcended just being either a catchy chorus or just something you shake your hips to. Like there was more to it, and I just wanted to eat it up. And again, I know that's an annoying Tool fan thing to say, but like when I was 16, that's how I felt, all right? I didn't know jack shit about anything. You could say that's still the case even now that I'm 25. I also think it's always a fun conversation to have with another Tool fan, just asking them what, you know, their favorite Tool album is, because you can get a different answer from multiple fans. Like, some people just love the darkness, the stripped downness of Undertow. Some people, you know, they like Enemas, and some people like 10,000 filler tracks. Sorry, I mean 10,000 days. And you know, I'm just joking when I say 10,000 filler tracks, but I mean, I don't know. Did some of these songs really have to make the album? You know, like what is it? Virginity, Trays, Intention, and like Light Been Conjuring. Did Light Been Conjuring really have to make the final cut? Was it just imperative? Would this album just fall apart if Light Been Conjuring just got axed from the, you know, final batch of songs? Like, come on, people, what are we doing? And I don't think anybody's favorite is Fear Inoculum, although I think I don't know if I'd want to say it's underrated, but people act like it's irredeemable. Like, I don't know, Numa's cool, Descending is cool. I hate how they did the packaging for the CD. Like, here's a normal CD, here's the packaging for this. I can't fucking fit this on my shelves. I have to keep tilting it over, and it just pisses me off. My favorite album from Tool, though, of course, I've been foreshadowing it for the whole video, Lateralis. I mean, when I was first getting into Tool, and on the title track, Lateralis, when it gets near the end to that guitar riff, where it's like, wow, 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 wow. I mean, that gave me a religious experience just listening to that.
With my feet up on the ground, I lose myself between the south and north.
So yeah, that's my list. I'm all out. You know, you can let me know what you think about the bands below. Any bands that you like that don't really fit into genres. If you don't like my list, I don't know, sue me.